This is Virtuous Roots, and we are Families of Virtue, where we reclaim virtue to bring into our homes and yours. I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackerbush.
I'm Nick Wiegand, and today we're talking about the spirit of Christmas. Going into the Christmas season, so often we always hear people talking about, well, it's the spirit of the holidays, and it. I know it. I know it bothers you when you hear it, and I'm totally on board. I completely understand why. But what's the initial issue that you have with the idea of the spirit of Christmas? Because I know it's not the spirit itself.
As I said in a recent sermon, it becomes a situation where during December we are generous, we are talking peace and love and friendship, and the rest of the 11 months we get to do whatever. We get to go back to ground zero and nastiness. And I the problem becomes that when you do the right thing for the wrong reason, you still don't have virtue. That virtue is this good quality of soul. It's an abiding habit, like a
Mm.
part of who you are. So in December, we flip a switch, so just like we would turn on the lights, we put on the lights, we put on the Christmas cheer, and it's a good thing in and of itself. I'm not saying being nice to people is wrong, but there is an element when we're being nice to people for the wrong reason, it's not really helping us. And there is a sense almost of, I feel like there's a slight hypocrisy, like, oh, you can be nice at Christmas time, but you can't be nice again the other 11 months of the year. That there really should be more of that at this time where we focus our thoughts on Jesus. That's what we're doing. But instead, we focus on being good for goodness sake rather than this is the time where we celebrate the birth of Christ. And so I think it creates bad habits where, we can turn off the goodness, turn on the good so that way later we can be naughty because it doesn't matter anymore. And I think we sort of set up our kids in that we begin to put them in that same vein, like, okay, now you need to behave, now you need to focus, and we have Christmas gifts and we have Christmas pictures and we have this and I think it was even I heard someone, the kids were playing and one of the kids got hurt. Like, don't mess up your face. We have to have Christmas pictures. Like, it's okay to mess up your face any other time of the year, but you can't mess up your face because we have to have Christmas pictures. I worry about what signal this sends, and if we can't do this a better way.
I think people listening are probably maybe in kind of initially they're like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't do that or nobody does that. But I think if you look at how families treat each other, it is the one time a year that families come together and try to get along, or actually it's the one time that they go out of their way to make it a little bit nicer. And so I think if we examine our family dynamics during this time, we can see, what this looks like in our own lives. I was looking for a verse that tried to encompass the entire spirit of Christmas. I don't know if it's the entire, but we're going to go with Philippians 2, 1 through 8. And I'm reading out of the ESV. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So I think if we look at the entire spirit of Christmas, I pretty much I think that encompasses it the best.
Yeah.
Um, how does this actually play out during this time of year?
Well, in terms of like how we should properly act as the spirit of Christmas, or
Sure. I don't know. You answer it how you want.
okay. Well, it's as Thomas was saying earlier. I was thinking about this as we're going through the verses, as well as just dealing with the spirit of Christmas itself. We have this kind of tendency to take certain days of the year, and then that be the day, like an anniversary or Valentine's Day, where we're going to do something special for our wives or for your husbands. And we tend to like kind of like, well, why not every day type of thing. And I think it's the same thing. And like, even in the verse, as you just mentioned, those types of qualities and understandings of who Christ is doesn't come like just from one exposure. It comes from us like grasping these concepts and actually living it out day to day. And things with virtue is the idea of habits, and sometimes that is a bad word. And some people like to think of bad habits, but there are good habits, and one of those being how we treat each other. I just find it's just one of those things that in the home, it's where we're tested the most. And I think that because I don't have anybody, like I don't have my pastor there. There's no one, you guys aren't there. We tend to let our hair down, and we're not, the way we act in public isn't exactly the way we act at home. And we tend to give our family our worst. And then we get this time of the year, and it comes up, and well, this is the time our family's going to turn everything around and just put on your just like whatever, like tradition or whatever you want to do. You put your decorations up and it changes the whole spirit of the house. But then those decorations come down, it seems like that spirit is lost with it.
I think it's funny that you brought up Valentine's Day because that's also one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
I despise Valentine's Day. I do not celebrate it.
Well,
If
yeah.
my wife is looking forward to Valentine's Day, I'm probably failing
Yeah.
as a
She might
husband.
say that she's not, but she's like every year just a little.
Like if she's really going out, if she's waiting for it, but she knows I don't.
But we know you, Nick, that you're the one every day you love your wife like it's Valentine's Day.
100%,
So-
100% of the time, all the time. Yeah.
But I think that's where when we talk about why this becomes the issue is that if the kids are looking and if the kids say, you know what, dad is being really nice because it's Christmas is not a good thing because they're recognizing when it's not Christmas, dad's a terrible person.
Yeah.
And I think that if we have the mindset that if the Philippians description is us, that this is our mindset, this is how we operate, then what happens is the kids will particularly recognize, well, dad is a good guy. Like, this is just how dad is. Now, dad might be doing something different at Christmas time because with Christmas time, you start having like where they will take up collections for toys for families because they don't have a Christmas. We're going to do some different things because we have some different, it's a different holiday. Like, so I'm not saying treat it like anything else. But I think the differentiation should be because of the holiday itself,
Yeah.
and that we're being different in the wrong ways. We should be the Philippians mindset all year long. Like we should have that spirit, and that there should be an additional generosity. There should be an additional component going and doing things because collecting toys for a family in need that has children in other times of the year might even be seen as kind of weird. They might be like, well, why are you doing this? But at Christmas time, it's like, oh, well, this is the generosity. This is the goodwill towards neighbors. There's different, just like even at American Thanksgiving, if you're collecting up and give a family a turkey for Thanksgiving that they don't normally have. If you just any other day of the year you show up with a turkey, they'll be like, okay, thank you for the turkey. That's weird.
Thank you for the bird that's going to probably be dry when I cook it.
Yeah, basically. But
Then you got to brine it, and that's fine.
yeah, so I think that again, it highlights in some sense our failures, that we should be acting at Christmas time with this spirit from what we already have, and then going above and beyond. And I don't think that's how we operate.
So you just said something that just kind of a light bulb moment of what right before Christmas, I know I'm going to start seeing it, and people will start reaching out to me because they know that we did the homeless ministry here at the church in the past, and that we're involved with the local Christian center where we deal with those in need. It hasn't started yet, but it will very soon. People will start reaching out to me and asking, or you'll see it on social media, asking, where can I donate? Which is good.
Mhm.
But then they'll also ask, hey, on Christmas Day, I want to go and feed those in need. And that is the spirit that we're talking about, is that they want to do this. But if you have to ask the question on Christmas, where can I donate to the needy and where can I go feed those in need? That is a huge indicator that you are literally only doing it for this really brief moment if
Mhm.
you don't even know where to get involved and where to go. Now, don't get me wrong, please, people need help and do that. But that should be that moment of realization. If I don't even know where I can help people, then I'm probably exhibiting exactly what we're talking about, where we're not doing the right things for the right reasons because we're really trying to seek and glorify Christ. But instead, we're trying to honestly seek and glorify ourselves to make us get the little warm and fuzzies inside during Christmas time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought I guarantee in the next week I see on Facebook someone start to reach out and say, "Hey, where can I start to feed? Where can I help the homeless on Christmas Day?" Or so they can feel really really good about themselves instead of the year long spirit of the virtue of charity.
Hmm.
I think that's also the key, is that it becomes self-serving generosity.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we lived in Charlotte, our church participated in a ministry, and when they were doing ministry, it was an organization, it wasn't necessarily ministry, but they during their training videos specifically, that's all I heard is how good you'll feel for doing these things, how much you get out of it. It was entirely selfish, entirely self-centered in
Hmm.
that sense. And there was no sense, and back then in that day, I didn't have the language of virtue, but I smelt something wrong. I couldn't put a name to it, but I'm like, something feels off about this. And I think in some ways we turn the spirit of Christmas into that
Mm.
look at how good you'll feel for giving to the poor. So it's no longer even actually about giving to the poor. They're incidental. It's about how great you'll feel. And now again, feeding the poor, feeding those in need, that is a good thing, even done with wrong motives. I get it. That I'm not saying quit feeding the poor, quit feeding the hungry. Like I'm not saying that. But
If you're doing the right thing for the wrong reason, please keep doing the right thing.
right.
But now try to cultivate it for the right reason.
But if you do the right thing for the right reason, it's going to become more of a natural part of who you are in your
Right.
life, and you'll actually see it done. But the whole concept of virtue we teach also is when you have a virtue when you do something quickly, easily, and with joy. And so at Christmas time, we're receiving this joy, but that's because, again, we have the wrong focus where it's like a self-centered focus. So during the year, if this is who we are, we do these things because that's who we are. Like we enjoy being this way. We enjoy doing these things rather than like at Christmas time, we get I don't know if it's the endorphin or the dopamine hit when you do something good. And that's really, I think, what it's become. And that's why, again, it's not virtuous, and that's why we're not seeing it
Yeah.
outside of the Christmas time, that no
Right.
one even talks this way. No one even considers doing this. And that's what I'm wanting to promote, is that not, and again, don't hear what I'm not saying. Let's not go hunt the dopamine fix all year long as we do good so we can take that hit. It's to recognize what is good, love the good, and doing the good. And that's when your hit is a sense of joy from achieving the good. That's what virtue looks like, the virtuous Christmas spirit, rather than that self-serving hit of Christmas joy that you get is what I feel like. I said, this is turned into, and I know this is not the case for everybody, but I think there's a large number of people, and the movies particularly portray this.
Yeah.
Like all the Christmas movies very much go in this vein.
I'm sorry, Nick. One of the things I was thinking too is that because we're speaking from a Christian perspective too, so there's a different quality of how we ought to act. This is our Savior that has born. That's what we're celebrating, and this is opportunity. And I think we should, as Christians, be like, this is not something we shouldn't be acting like the pagans outside of Christendom, the ones that just celebrating the holiday for the gifts and all those other things. We should be the one um, having this cultivated within our hearts the whole year and be leading the way in those charges towards Christmas time. And I think it should be coming from the church. Like the church should be active, but having people that have been preparing. And I think that's really good what you said earlier, Nick, about the people just like last minute are like, well, just I feel pretty bad this week, and maybe this will help, and kind of using it as a kind of like some sort of way of making themselves feel better about their situation. But I think that as Christians, we ought this is a special time. We ought to be celebrating. This is absolutely amazing, that this miracle of Jesus Christ being born. We should be celebrating it, and we should bring about a sense of awe, and also of charity and other things, generosity that's beyond our normal mode of operation. That's why it is a holiday. Holidays are outside the mode of normal operation. So
So I know we keep talking about the dopamine or the feeling good. Verse 2, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves.
yes,
One thing I want to make sure that I key in on is, if we're going to have this spirit of Christmas, and this is what we're going to want to cultivate in our own families and our own lives and in the lives of, those around us and those listening, is it's really important to understand that it's not always going to feel good.
no,
And if we're doing it for the right reasons, then we can still have peace and joy in that moment. But I know for a fact, and it goes back to that homeless ministry I was talking about that I was involved with kind of as an early Christian. My job that day was to fill everybody's cups with my little pitcher of, I don't know, Kool-Aid or whatever it was. And there was a gentleman who finished his Kool-Aid and wanted more. And he goes, over here. And he snapped at me and pointed at his cup like I was supposed to just hop to. And I poured the Kool-Aid, but I did not pour the Kool-Aid with a happy heart. And I look back on that and I think about that moment a lot, because it really irritated me. And I know in that moment, I was doing it not for the right reasons, even though he was disrespectful, and even though I couldn't find joy in that moment because I was not pure of heart, and there was a selfish ambition, there was an ego or a conceit, and so it's not always going to feel good.
yeah.
And when that happens, how do we recognize that within ourselves, and then how do we find that peace or recapture, that spirit for the right reasons?
I think that's why Paul brings in the idea of humility, because a big part of probably what you were feeling, because I think of this as a pastor, that many times those kinds of things have happened to me, where
Mhm.
somebody was very assuming and derogatory.
For the record, this was pre-pastor, but I was saved. So
Yes,
this
yeah,
was
but
a spiritual baby.
even as a pastor, I've encountered this. And again, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, if you're doing it for your own, like he says, do nothing out of selfish ambition. If you're doing it for your ego and you take an ego hit, you're not going to accept that. You're going to rage against it. And again, as a pastor, when people would do something, I would recognize, what, it doesn't matter. That's not why we're here. That's not whatever the situation was. And I remember many times, whether it was students from the Bible college or somebody else, they were like, "How can you let people treat you that way?" And I'm like, "Because it's not about me. This is what How could Jesus allow people to treat him the way he did?
Yeah, no kidding.
Because he had humility, because he was the heir of the throne of God. I mean, the Son of God. Who else has greater need for respect, and just like everything he was, and yet choosing to be born at this time of year. This is worth bringing up, not so much with the spirit of Christmas, but I have a friend of mine who went to Bethlehem, who saw kind of what the place, like where the animals were kept. And he has a picture, and there's a manger there, stone mangers, not the little wooden mangers. And he's like, "What do you see on the floor?" And I was like, "I don't know. What is that?" He's like, "It's animal droppings everywhere." I mean, it's a stable.
Right.
They're not,
Yeah.
it's very different from the way we think of it. And he's like, "This is what Jesus was born into.
Yeah.
This is what he chose." And I'm like, how many of us would have even remotely found that acceptable?
So what you're saying is on all the nativity scenes, we didn't need to put animal poo everywhere to
Well,
bring it
if
to life.
you wanted to be historically accurate,
Okay.
that's a different
Probably. Okay.
different topic for a
sorry.
different day with nativity scenes. But
Squirrel.
point being, yes, Jesus displays that humility at a level that I think we completely miss. I think that we have a sense of his humility with some of the things we see. Like we always look at the soldiers who spit on him. We look at, Jesus saying, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. We look at that. But those were almost like your single instances. And there was a vast just lifestyle that he lived. And that's why that Christmas spirit is impossible to fake the one time of the year.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it out of humility. Humility is not what's driving you. It's going to be selfish ambition. It's going to be, I'm feeling good about this, or maybe even some sense of penance that sometimes people feel like we need to do something, because we have so much, like they almost feel bad for having so much. It's just the wrong motives. And I think this is one of the things we need to communicate in our families, and by families doing this, our churches might also have a better sense of virtuous Christmas spirit as well.
So I know you and I, Thomas, have a unique relationship in the fact that I have invited you into my life to critique me, hold me accountable to many, many aspects. And I think that in my life, I do have a couple of men that I've really kind of invited in to hold me accountable to these ideas and hopefully snatch a knot in my tail when I'm getting a little prideful or whatnot to kind of like balance me back out. How do we do that in our families? How do we hold each other accountable and still continue with this spirit and make sure that we're not doing it in selfish ambition?
Well, I would say as the father of the household, it's like one of the things I recognize whenever there's certain things, you recognize maybe in your wife, or that maybe the way they're behaving or something in a situation, you want to like acknowledge that. I recognize too that as soon as I start trying, I don't know if I'm speaking for all married men, but if I start trying to critique and start to like in that way, my wife, it goes right back. It's like the idea of, judge not, or like you be judged. So I would say that for the head of the household, and I know there's a lot of single moms out there as well. It starts with the head. It starts with them finding that humility. And I forgot where I read this quote, but it's like, I forgot who wrote it, but the idea is like the first act of humility stings, but then it gets easier. It's like that first initial, like, when you're feeling that towards that man who's like clicking his finger, and that's natural, like, a reaction to that. But that's like that first sting of that. And then you realized, like, you're thinking about back on it now, you humbled yourself, and you didn't say anything, and he poured his glass. And regardless of what kind of impact you had on him, it did something for you because you recognized that. And now you're looking back on it, you're like, I wish that I acted a little bit differently at that time, at least internally. And I think that's true for me in my household too. Like every time I think about my kids and I'm like, they're not doing what I want them to do, or they're not acting the way they ought to. And I'm like, I'm going to go in there but in reality, I'm like, I got to change myself. I got to be that example. And that's the idea of virtue as well, especially for children and our wives as well as men. And it's really important for us to lead by example and be that self-sacrificial person.
Well, and to listen to their counsel, right?
Oh yeah,
Being the head of the
true,
household
too.
isn't necessarily, it's and not even necessary. It's not authoritarian in nature,
No.
but opening ourselves up to being held accountable by that wise counsel of the amazing women that we brought into our lives,
Absolutely.
and vice versa.
And I think that sting of humility a lot of times comes from our wives.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
Because like you said, they're the first ones
Sure it
to.
does. I don't know if I want to keep going on this
Yeah.
topic, but
We'll have to repent
no.
and call it a day.
yeah. So no, yeah, if we're going into Christmas, focusing on the spirit of Christmas this holiday, I think is important, but we really must push on through to the rest of the year. And
Certainly.
if it's something that you're struggling with, I would highly recommend finding someone that can mentor you in this and hold you accountable throughout and, kind of pull you out, help you pull your head out of places it doesn't belong, when you're acting up. Well, gentlemen, again, I appreciate the conversation, and you can find us at familiesofvirtue.com, and we will talk to you next time.